Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are doing something a little different than usual.
A lot different, actually.
Yeah, true. Normally we look outward, right? We look
Right.
at history, tech, the shifting sands of geopolitics. But today, we are turning the lens entirely inward. We are looking at the lens itself. And to get us started, I actually want you, the listener, to just imagine a sound. Just picture a cold, rhythmic, mechanical clicking, like a metronome.
hmm
Just click, click, click.
It's sterile, it's predictable, and it is the most intimate thing you possess. But when you really try to pin it down, it might be the most alien thing in the entire universe. That sound, that rhythmic clicking, it represents the physical reality of your brain.
The machine.
Right. It's the firing of neurons, it's sodium and potassium ions just rushing across cell membranes. It is totally objective, measurable, and as you said, it is a machine at work.
But then, and keep imagining with us here, slowly let that clicking fade out, and I want you to replace it in your mind with something else. Picture a lush, swelling orchestral chord.
Like a symphony.
Exactly, an explosion of violins and cellos, just incredibly rich with emotion and color and texture.
And that music, that's you. That is the actual experience of being alive. It's the redness of a rose, the bitterness of coffee, or, that really sharp pang of nostalgia when you smell rain on hot asphalt.
And the mystery here, the absolute nightmare of a puzzle that we are deep diving into today, is how you get from the click to the chord.
Yeah.
How do you get from this wet, gray, physical matter inside your skull to the Technicolor movie playing inside your head? Because on paper, those two things shouldn't have anything to do with each other.
They shouldn't. And this is what philosophers and neuroscientists call the hard problem of consciousness. It is the question that literally keeps them up at night. And help us navigate this, we're doing a deep dive into a really fascinating text today called The Divine I by J.R. Ahmed.
That's quite a read.
It is. It's this ambitious synthesis of philosophy, neuroscience, and theology that tries to answer a question posed in the text's opening poem: why subjective experience from physical forms does leap.
From physical forms does leap. I love that imagery so much because it frames our whole mission today perfectly. We were going to try to figure out why we aren't just biological robots.
Right.
Like, why aren't we just processing data in the dark? Why is there an eye behind your eyes? Because, honestly, if we were just survival machines, we wouldn't need to actually feel the sunset.
No, we wouldn't. We would just need to process the photon data, calculate the drop in temperature, and register the time until darkness to find shelter.
Exactly. So we are moving from the mechanics of the brain to the what Hex calls the aboutness of thought. And fair warning to everyone listening, we are going to challenge some pretty deeply held assumptions you might have about what you actually are. We're going to look at the empiricist view, the rationalist view, and then try to synthesize them.
So buckle up. We are diving into the unexplained I.
And I think we should start in a place that feels very familiar to me, at least, but might feel a bit cold to you.
Let's call this the cold chamber.
The cold chamber, the domain of the empiricist. Right. And honestly, this is where I usually live. I am a science geek at heart. I look at the brain, and I see an absolute masterpiece of engineering. I mean, we know so much about it now. We know that if I were to poke a certain part of your motor cortex, your finger twitches. Or if I stimulate another part, you might smell burnt toast or suddenly hear a melody from your childhood. We have mapped the territory.
We have mapped the wiring, absolutely. We understand the chemistry, the dopamine, the serotonin. We understand the electricity. The source material actually refers to this as the neural firings, objective, seen, and known. We can literally put you in an fMRI machine and watch the blood flow change. We can see which parts of your brain light up when you think about your mother or do a math equation.
Right. And for a long time, the assumption, and certainly the assumption I grew up with, was just that if we keep mapping it, if we just get a high enough resolution scan of the wiring, we will eventually explain everything.
We'll solve the equation of you.
Exactly. But this source, the divine I, throws a massive wrench into those gears. It talks about something called the explanatory gap.
And it is a gap, a massive one. Because it's not just a gap in our current data, it's a gap in kind. Let's actually stick with the example from the text to really drill down into this. Let's think about the color red.
Okay, I'm thinking about red. I'm picturing a bright red fire engine.
Perfect. Now, science can tell us everything about the physical properties of that red fire engine. It can describe the exact wavelength of light bouncing off the paint, roughly 650 nanometers.
Sure.
It can describe how that specific wavelength of light enters your eye, hits the retina, how the photoreceptors bleach, and how that signal travels down the optic nerve straight to the visual cortex. We can track the entire electrochemical cascade perfectly.
We can track it all the way. We can watch the neurons firing in response to the light and measure the exact frequency of the electrical spikes.
Right, but here is the question, where is the redness?
Well, I mean, it's in the processing, right?
Is it, though? I mean, the feeling, the subjective redness. You can look at a printout of neural spikes on a computer screen. You can look at the wavelength data. You can measure the chemical exchange across the synapse. But nowhere in that physical data is the actual experience of the color. You cannot cut open a brain and show me a neuron that is literally red. You can only show me a neuron that is firing.
And that's qualia, right?
Exactly. Qualia. It's the what it's like factor. Why does that specific pattern of neural firing feel like red and not like the sound of a ringing bell or the taste of salt? Or, even more fundamentally, why does it feel like anything at all?
Yeah, this brings up the philosophical zombie argument.
It does. David Chalmers made this famous, and it really echoes the points made in The Divine Eye. Imagine a being that is physically identical to you. I mean, molecule for molecule. It behaves exactly like you.
Right. If you pinch it, it says ouch.
Right, and if you show it a red apple, it says, oh, that is red. But inside, there is no light on. It is entirely dark. It is processing data, but it is not experiencing anything.
Which is a terrifying thought, honestly. But the point is, according to pure physics, that zombies should be totally possible. In fact, if we were just matter, we actually should be zombies.
Precisely. Why isn't the brain just processing the information, light wavelength 650 nanometers detected, and reacting automatically without the internal light show? Why isn't it just information processing in the dark? That is the hard problem.
Wow.
And the source material argues that this isn't just a matter of us not knowing enough neuroscience yet. It's not a puzzle we solve with a better microscope. It argues there's a fundamental disconnect.
It's kind of like looking at a map of New York City and expecting to find the smell of dollar pizza or the sound of honking cabs hidden in the ink and paper. Like, the map represents the territory, but it is not the experience of the territory.
That is a brilliant analogy. The source suggests that expecting to find sadness or seeing blue inside a physical neuron is a category error. It's like taking apart a stereo speaker to find the little person singing inside.
Yeah.
The text has this really poetic line, "The hard problem looms large, a chasm dark and wide. How does the brain's pure wiring felt experience provide?"
And goes on to say, not mere reactions, predictable and cold, but Qualia's rich tapestry, a wonder to behold. And it is true. If we were just machines, just wet computers made of meat, you would completely expect the output to be mechanistic. Input A leads to output B.
But human experience isn't just a mechanistic output. It's an ineffable richness. And this is exactly where the failure of reductionism comes in.
Reductionism being the idea that you could explain a complex thing just by looking at its smallest parts. Like explaining how a car drives by just staring at the carbon atoms in the engine block.
All right. And look, reductionism works wonders for chemistry. It is amazing for physics. But the source argues that when it comes to consciousness, we are hitting the, as it calls it, limits of reductionism on reason's climbing hill. You can smash the brain down to its base atoms, but you lose the mind entirely in the process. The rationalist perspective here is that you simply cannot get the subjective solely from the objective.
You can't squeeze love out of a carbon atom.
No matter how hard you squeeze.
Okay, so let's pause there for a second. We have established that the empiricist view, the purely physicalist view, hits a massive wall when it tries to explain the feeling of things. But the text doesn't stop there. It pivots from feeling to thinking.
Yes, it moves us into the next segment of our deep dive. Let's call this the arrow of thought.
The arrow of thought, which sounds a bit abstract, I have to say.
It is abstract, but it's crucial for understanding the whole picture. This moves us from qualia to intentionality.
Intentionality. Now, I feel like I need to clarify this for the listener, because in normal conversation, intentionality means doing something on purpose, like I intended to eat the last cookie. But in philosophy, it means something entirely different, doesn't it?
It does. In this context, it refers to aboutness.
Aboutness, okay.
Think about the sentence in the source text. How can mere atoms harbor such aboutness on a shelf? Let's unpack this using the analogy they provide. Think about a rock sitting on a shelf.
Okay, picturing a rock.
A rock is just there. It isn't about anything. It has mass, it has a shape, it has a location in space. But it does not represent anything else. It doesn't point to anything outside itself. It is pure, self-contained existence.
Sure, but what about something like a map? A map sitting on that same shelf is about a city.
Is it? Or is it just ink arranged on paper?
Well, if I pick it up and look at it, I can see the streets. I can use it to find my way downtown.
Exactly. It is only about the city because you, a conscious mind, are looking at it and interpreting it. Without a conscious mind to read it, the map is just wood pulp and pigment. It has no intrinsic meaning. The meaning is derived entirely from the observer, not inherent in the physical object itself.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. But let me put my empiricist hat back on and play devil's advocate. What about a computer program? Because that processes data. It represents things. My financial software represents my actual bank account.
But does it? Or is it just manipulating symbols based on syntax? A calculator doesn't actually know that 2 plus 2 equals 4.
It doesn't.
No, it just knows that when these specific electronic gates open, those specific LED lights turn on. It has absolutely no understanding of the concept of the number 4. It has no understanding of money or a bank. It is purely a syntactic engine running on physical laws.
This is John Searle's Chinese room argument, essentially.
Precisely. You can follow a complex rulebook to manipulate symbols perfectly without ever understanding what the symbols actually mean.
Well, we understand.
Yes, you do understand. When you think about the Eiffel Tower, your thought is actually about the Eiffel Tower. It's directed at it. Your thought is reaching out across space and time to reference something else. That is intentionality. And the source argues that pure physical matter simply cannot do that.
Because physical matter is just confined to the here and now.
Right. Physical states are just states. One atom bumping into another atom doesn't mean anything. So the core argument here is, if the universe is purely physical and atoms have no inherent meaning, then how on earth can our thoughts have meaning? If your brain is just a collection of atoms, your thoughts should just be physical events, like bubbles popping in a glass of soda.
The fact that I can sit here right now and think about the future or worry about some hypothetical scenario or, love a person who is currently on the other side of the planet.
That arrow of thought suggests that your mind possesses a property that matter inherently lacks. It implies that thoughts lack a sufficient grounding in the physical world alone. You need something else to provide that semantic content, that true meaning.
And this connects deeply to the idea of the unified self, too. The I that is actually doing all this thinking.
This is one of the most unsettling realizations when you really start looking at the biology. Your body is in a constant, never-ending state of flux.
Right, cells are constantly dying, new cells are regenerating. I read once that we basically replace almost all our atoms every 7 years or so.
The turnover is constant. The atoms making up your brain today are not the same atoms that were there when you were a young child. The neural connections have physically rewired themselves millions of times. Physically speaking, you are a completely different object than you were 10 years ago.
It's the classic ship of Theseus paradox. If you replace every single wooden plank on a ship, over time, is still the same ship.
Exactly. If you define you strictly as your physical body, then the you from childhood is dead, gone, dispersed into the ecosystem.
But subjectively, I don't feel that way. I feel like the exact same person. I have a continuous thread of memory, of identity. I see when I was 6 as a distinct continuation of when I am 60.
So if the hardware is constantly being swapped out and replaced, what is the I that stays? What is the thread that is holding all those pearls together?
The source asserts that this unique, irreducible I points directly to a non-physical substratum, something that isn't made of the changing atoms at all.
Right. It argues that if you were just the flow of atoms, your identity would just flow away right along with them. The fact that you remain, you suggest you are anchored in something entirely different.
Okay, so let's quickly recap where we are. We have the hard problem, which is qualia, the feeling. We have the arrow of thought, which is intentionality, the meaning. And we have the unified self, the continuous identity. The source material, the divine I, lays all this out to basically say, materialism just doesn't work. It's incomplete. It explains the machine, sure, but it completely misses the operator.
Which brings us to the synthesis. Because the source doesn't just tear down the materialist view, it proposes a model, a really elegant model rooted in the Quran.
Let's move into this next segment, which I want to call the breath in the clay, because the imagery used here is just so striking.
It really is.
Okay.
The text refers to the creation of humanity as a composition of two totally distinct elements. It completely rejects the idea that we are monistic, just one unified physical thing. It embraces a dual aspect.
First, there's the clay.
Yes. The clay represents the material origin, the biology, the machinery we've been talking about this whole time. We are made of the earth. We have Carbon, water, minerals. We have incredibly complex neural networks and very real biological drives. We have hunger, thirst, the instinct to survive and reproduce.
So that's the robot part. That's the cold clicking metronome. That is the part of us that belongs entirely to the animal kingdom.
Correct. But then the text references a specific concept found in Surah 38, verse 72. It talks about God having breathed into him from my created soul. This is the ruh, the spirit.
So the Quranic model is essentially that we are a biological machine infused with a completely transcendent element.
A transcendent gift, yes. And for the author, this absolutely solves the explanatory gap, the feeling of redness, the aboutness of a thought, the enduring. Those are properties of the ruh, not the clay. The clay processes the physical data, but the ruh is what actually experiences it.
Okay, but wait a minute. I have to play the skeptic here again. The empiricist in me is screaming right now.
I fully expected it to. Go ahead.
We know unequivocally that physical brain damage affects the mind. This is the classic counter-argument to any kind of dualism. If I get hit hard in the head, I might lose my memory. If I drink way too much alcohol, my consciousness gets altered, I get sloppy. If I take a heavy sedative, my consciousness fades out entirely. If we are these transcendent, non-physical spirits, why are we so incredibly dependent on the physical chemistry? Why does the ghost get drunk when the machine drinks the wine?
That is the million-dollar question. In philosophy, it's called the interaction problem. And the source provides a truly fascinating analogy to answer exactly this. The analogy of the pipe organ.
The pipe organ. Okay, paint the picture for me. How does this work?
Imagine a massive, incredibly intricate pipe organ in a grand cathedral. It has bellows, hundreds of keys, stops, thousands of individual pipes ranging from tiny to huge. It is a profoundly complex physical machine. In this analogy, that organ is the brain.
Okay, I'm with you. It's structure. It's the hardware.
Now, for that magnificent organ to actually make music, it needs wind, it needs air flowing through it. That invisible air is the consciousness, the ruh.
So the brain is the instrument and the spirit is the breath moving through it.
Exactly. Now, consider your objection about brain damage. If the physical organ is damaged, say a pipe is crushed or a key gets stuck, the music that comes out is going to be distorted. It might sound terrible and chaotic. Or if the bellows break entirely, the music might stop completely.
Right. If I take a sledgehammer and smash the keys, the melody is ruined.
But does that mean the air itself has ceased to exist? Does it mean the musician who was playing the keys has vanished from the universe?
No, it just means the instrument is broken. The air is still there, but it can't be expressed properly.
Exactly. It simply means the physical instrument can no longer channel that breath into sound in this specific physical realm.
That actually makes a tremendous amount of sense. So the correlation we see in science, where brain state A always equals mental state B, is just us observing the mechanics of the instrument working properly.
Precisely. The source material says, the brain, a mere instrument for consciousness to play, not sole producer of it at the close of every day. Without the organ, the music cannot manifest here in the physical world. But the organ does not create the air, it merely channels it.
It totally flips the relationship. Instead of the brain acting like a factory manufacturing the mind out of nothing, the brain is acting more like a receiver, like a radio antenna picking up a signal, or the organ processing the air.
And this beautifully explains why we have this internal movie playing. The clay gives us the sensory input, the physical eyes detect the light waves, but the ruh provides the watcher, the experiencer. It explains why we intrinsically feel distinct from our bodies, even while we are inextricably trapped inside them for now.
So if we pull back, what does this all mean for the logic of the universe as a whole? If we accept this model, even just as a working hypothesis, it totally changes how we view reality. Reality stops being a random accident of physics and starts looking like architecture.
Yes, it leads us directly to what we might call the logic of the soul.
This is segment 4, architectural justice. Because the divine eye argues that this dualistic model isn't just poetic, wishful thinking, it's a logical necessity based on the evidence.
The source breaks this down using both deductive and inductive logical arguments. And it's so important to look at these because a lot of people assume that faith or theology is just blind belief. But the text argues that this conclusion is actually the result of rigorous reason.
Okay, let's unpack the logic. I love a good syllogism. Let's start with the deductive approach they outline.
It goes something like this. Premise 1, consciousness exists.
I think we can all agree on that one. Descartes did, anyway.
Yeah.
It's the one thing you literally cannot doubt, because you have to be conscious to even attempt to doubt it.
Right. Premise 2, consciousness is non-physical. It is irreducible to matter, which we established when we talked about the hard problem and the explanatory gap.
Yep, the redness of red isn't in the atoms.
Premise 3. Every non-physical phenomenon must have a cause that is sufficient to produce it.
Okay.
Therefore, the conclusion is a non-physical intelligent cause exists.
It's a very straight line. If you categorically cannot get mind from dead matter, you must get mind from a greater mind, with a capital M.
Exactly. There is an old philosophical principle that the stream cannot rise higher than its source. If the universe somehow produces consciousness, the fundamental source of the universe must already possess the qualities of consciousness. You simply can't give what you don't have. Dead, blind matter cannot somehow give birth to living, seeing awareness.
Then there is the inductive approach they use, which is basically an inference to the best explanation.
This is a bit more like a detective solving a crime scene. We look at the available evidence. We observe this incredibly weird, undeniable thing called consciousness. We know it doesn't fit into the standard materialist box. So what is the most plausible explanation for its existence? That it just magically popped into existence by an unfathomable cosmic accident, or that it originates from a source that inherently shares its exact nature?
Which touches on the design versus accident argument in the text, specifically this idea of regular correlation.
Yes. This is a subtle point, but it's incredibly powerful. Think about this. Why is there such a reliable, consistent link between our physical brain states and our internal feelings? Why does the stimulation of C fibers in the brain always feel like pain? Why doesn't it feel like the smell of vanilla one day and the sound of a trumpet the next?
Or why doesn't it just feel like nothing at all? Why aren't the wires totally crossed randomly?
Right. The fact that the physical world, the brain, and the non-physical world, the mind, interact in such a perfectly reliable, law-like way implies an orchestration. It implies a pre-existing design that intentionally bridges the two distinct realms.
If you see a highly complex key fitting perfectly into an intricate lock,
Hmm.
you assume they were intentionally made for each other. You don't assume the lock just accidentally evolved over billions of years to randomly fit that exact key shape.
Precisely. The source argues this correlation is clear evidence of thoughtful design, that the eye is a divine imprint, not a biological glitch. The very fact that the clay and the roux are so perfectly tuned to work together strongly suggests there is a tuner.
But there is another massive layer to this. It's not just about passively feeling pain or seeing the color red. It's about what we actively do with those feelings. It is about agency.
And this brings us to what I think is the most consequential part of our entire deep dive, the moral mirror.
Segment 5. Because if we are just machines, then morality is a bit of a glitch, isn't it? Or maybe just an illusion entirely.
It's much worse than a glitch. It's a complete illusion. If we are purely material beings, if we are just predictable and cold, as the poem states, then we are entirely deterministic.
Determinism. For the listener, that's the idea that absolutely everything in the universe is just a chain of cause and effect.
Right. If your brain is just chemistry, then your choices are just the inevitable result of previous chemical states. You didn't freely choose to listen to this deep dive today. Your atoms just collided in a predefined way dating back to the Big Bang that forced it to happen. It's like billiard balls on a table. Once the cue ball is struck, the rest is just unavoidable physics.
Which means I'm not actually responsible for anything I do. The 8-ball isn't guilty for going into the corner pocket. It was just hit.
Exactly. And that completely contradicts our deepest, most profound lived experience. We feel accountable. We feel the immense weight of our choices. We feel guilt. We feel pride. We feel the heavy burden of ought, of what we should do.
The source text calls this the moral might.
Yes, the I that grapples dilemmas. Think about the very last time you had to make a genuinely tough ethical choice. Maybe it was deciding to tell the truth, even though you knew it would hurt you personally. Or maybe forcing yourself to stop and help a stranger when you were completely exhausted and just wanted to go home. Think about that internal struggle, that agonizing debate inside your head.
Yeah, I know the feeling well.
The rationalist argument here is that a machine does not struggle. A calculator never agonizes over whether the answer should be 4 or 5. It just computes the input. A hungry lion doesn't agonize over the morality of eating a gazelle. It just eats. It simply follows its biological programming.
But we do. We can actually fight our own biology. We can go on a hunger strike for a political cause, completely overriding our survival instinct. We can sacrifice our own safety for a total stranger.
We can mentally stand back evaluate our own biological impulses, judge them, and choose to go against them. That profound ability to veto your own biology points directly to something that is genuinely free.
Right.
And the source connects this moral agency directly back to the Ru. The capability to choose, to reason, and to be held accountable is a divine endowment. It is the spirit that allows us to rise above the programming of the clay. The clay basically just says survive, consume, replicate. But the Ru says justice, mercy, truth.
It creates a vertical dimension to our entire existence. We aren't just moving horizontally across the earth like animals. We are constantly moving up or down morally based on our choices.
And there is a specific verse cited here that I think really turns the camera around beautifully. Surah 41, verse 53.
Soon we will show them our signs in the utmost horizons and within themselves.
Within themselves.
This introduces the concept of tafakkur, right? Reflection, introspection.
Yes. The source argues that the universe within the human psyche, the mind, is just as vast and complex as the physical universe without. We build these giant multi-billion-dollar telescopes to look out at the furthest horizons to find signs of the Big Bang or dark matter. But the text says, stop and look inside.
It's almost like the entire cosmos is perfectly mirrored inside of us.
And the very act of introspection, the sheer ability to look inside and say, I exist, I feel, I am, is itself a massive signpost. The source says it is a mirror of divinity. By looking inward, we aren't just seeing neurons firing in the dark, we are seeing the literal signature of the Creator.
It's so interesting because normally when people look for signs of a higher power, they look at external things, a beautiful sunset or the insane complexity of DNA or the mathematical fine-tuning of gravity.
True, but the text argues the most undeniable sign of all is the one doing the looking. The fact that there is a looker at all. You can theoretically doubt the external world, maybe we are all in a computer simulation, maybe life is just a very vivid dream, but you cannot doubt the you that is currently experiencing the doubt. The subject itself is the ultimate proof.
That brings us to the end of the arguments laid out in the source material, and I have to say, looking at it all together, it completely shifts the perspective on the hard problem.
It does. It suggests that the hard problem of consciousness isn't actually a puzzle waiting to be solved by discovering a new subatomic particle or building a better MRI machine. It implies that material science, for all of its incredible glory and utility, has a hard limit.
Right. It's not a bug in our scientific system.
Right.
It's a feature of reality.
It's a signal.
No.
The stubborn persistence of this mystery, despite all of our massive scientific advancements, is exactly the point. The fact that we categorically cannot explain the I with physical atoms is like a giant flashing neon sign in the universe saying, you are more than this.
The brain processes, but the spirit perceives.
That is the ultimate takeaway. The I is a distant, shining star, as the opening poem says. It is anchored here in the physical world, yes, but it originates from somewhere else entirely.
It is a lot to take in, but it kind of re-enchants the world a little bit, doesn't it? Makes the simple, mundane act of just drinking a cup of coffee or listening to a song feel momentous, like it's an actual cosmic event happening inside you.
It honors the mystery of our existence. It reminds us that while we are indeed made of dust, we are not just dust. We are the breath that moves the dust.
You know, it makes me think about something we haven't touched on yet. If the sheer fact that we exist as observers is the sign, what if the universe itself required us? Like, what if the universe needed a way to perceive its own beauty, to understand its own laws, and so it produced us, or we were placed here, to be the eyes and ears of the cosmos? That our questioning isn't just an evolutionary byproduct, but the very purpose of the architecture.
That is a profound thought.
So next time you hear that click, the cold click of the physical world, the click of data, the click of the daily grind,
Stop and listen for the music. Listen for the thing inside you that is listening.
because that might be the most real thing there is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Signs within yourselves.